Hey everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to tonight's event. Thank you Alex for putting this together. So Alex and I both have started up different tech groups here in Orlando. Myself and a few others started Accelerate Orlando. Alex is a part of that. Accelerate Orlando is a technical optimist user group, philosophically minded. Like last month we hosted a talk on post-AGI economics, for instance. Alex, you want to mention Build the Future real quick?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to thank Will for guiding the way for me and my group, Build the Future, which is really mainly organizing this one. So thank you, Will, for showing us, how to do it, and for showing me how to do it and what's possible, what can be done. And I think I had a moment where I visited San Francisco about, I think 2 years ago in August. It's like a year and 9 months or whatever. And when I was there, I was talking to some people, meeting some interesting founders, and they said, "What the heck are you doing in Orlando? Your tribe is here. You should come here." And I went home, back to Orlando, and I was very sad. And I was like, I have to figure out how to go to San Francisco. And then, as the months passed, I was like, you know what? I bet I'm not the only person who thinks AI is cool in Orlando. And from there, I decided to put out the bat signal, and Build the Future was born. And so thank you. Everyone here today is my birthday, and so this is you all being here, innovators, inventors, hackers, we're all discovering this stuff together. So thank you so much for all coming out to celebrate my birthday with me and get to learn a little bit about what it means to give an agent a workspace. All right.
Let's do it.
Let's get started.
Oh wait, one more announcement. As you probably noticed, Accelerate Orlando and Build the Future have been combining our events the past couple months. Bottom line is we're going to continue doing that moving forward. I don't know if we'll merge the names or anything like that, but it just makes more sense to bring the community together in that way because the topics are so aligned. So yeah, excited to bring the two groups officially together. So
yeah, another really interesting note, we have almost 400 people on our shared mailing list between the both of us, between OTAB, Accelerate Orlando, and Build the Future. So we really have done a great job of putting out that bat signal, and you guys are a testament of us all coming together. So thank you so much again. All right, let's get started. I'll be honest, I'm still kind of waiting for my mom to come in, so she's like a little, I'm like kind of trying to buy her time, but I guess I should just get started without her. All right, so today we're going to talk about what it means to give your agent a workspace and how it lays the foundation for what I call messy forever work. Talk about that in a second. I'm also, my code, just so you guys know, my agent is actually still finishing the talk as we speak. So some things are gonna be iterated as we go. We're gonna see how it shakes out.
So I haven't. Gonna be late.
This is actually my. Yeah, I wasn't late.
You weren't late. This thing was.
The presentation is half baked. So yeah, let's get into it. So today we're really just gonna start with my claim. I think that all agents are gonna start to come with a workspace out of the box in the future. Today they don't do that. You just kind of load them into your project. We'll talk about that more in a second. But that is really my claim, is that in the future, all agents will come with a workspace out of the box. And maybe a very complex concept and all the ways that everything interweaves together, but ultimately it's gonna boil down to 3 simple folders. So we all have our projects folder. This is your code bases, your slide decks, whatever you have. There's 2 new folder types that I'm gonna introduce today. The first one is called the roadmap folder, which holds my ticket system. And the second folder is the corpus folder, which holds my intelligence corpus. And more on that later. So I wanted to zoom out for a second and ask a question that's kind of weird and a little different. Why is work? Not what is work. We all know what it is, but why is it? For me, work is, customers have needs, and there's a company promise. And that's what leads to work, right? Is like the customer has a need. We say we can deliver this thing, and then now we do work, and we deliver value. In short, it's a customer saying, wow, you can do this amazing thing for me, and I only have to pay this much. Deal. So now we have agents to help us with our work. Most people open the agent in a project, they chat with it a bunch, they brainstorm, they grind out the work in collaboration, they close the chat and move on. And this, kind of like project to agent chat to done, it works very well for, kind of clean, smaller tasks. Once you have a very long running task, my mom made a, yay! Okay, well, it's not here yet, but anyways, I'm walking over. All right, so yeah, in short, this is good for like small, scoped, clear beginning and end, but here's the deal. Real work doesn't look like that. These are some, as I started to think about it, these are some properties that work actually has, right? So first on, work builds on itself. Work gets interrupted. Work changes when reality changes, business requirements, etc. Work reveals more work. You find work as you carry on. Work can always go further. It can be deeper. It can be more thorough. It can be faster. Work can do damage, right? Like you can, as I'm not even going to go into all the things that can happen when you do work, but as a developer, we can screw up. Work must be understood. You have to understand what you're delivering. Work requires accountability. You as the company, you as the engineer, you as whatever worker you are, when you put your name on it, when you deliver this work, you're accountable for it. And it has to land. It has to get in that customer's hand. It has to be delivered. It has to be maintained for months, years, sometimes a lifetime. And it should make future work easier. It also, the best present of doing great work is more work comes your way, so it scales with success. And last but not least, it keeps going. Work keeps going. I want to take a moment to really zoom into that. If the business is working, the work should not stop. The business should not stop. And if the business does not stop, the work does not stop. Messy, forever work needs semi-organized, forever context. And that is what I'll explain to you today with giving my agent a workspace. We're giving it a semi-organized, forever place to work and build its forever context. So I just want to take a moment to zoom out and tell you guys, like, this is not really my first rodeo. This mismatch is not new to me. I've tried to solve it many times, like every day of like the last year and a half. But specifically, I've given 2 previous talks. So the first talk I gave was called How to Vibe Code Responsibly. There were a few key principles that I'll go through now, and some of them stayed, some of them didn't stay. The first one was this concept of a feature ledger. So as you're doing your work, you're just keeping a markdown file and adding kind of like this, we did this, we made this decision. It ends up being very messy. Immutability, this idea of every time you make a decision in your markdown file, you don't touch it. You're writing in pen, not pencil. Alignment, it's sometimes your agent may do the wrong thing, but it's not because the agent is trying to be malicious. It's just because you hadn't aligned hard enough with it, right? You didn't spend enough time getting on the same page. Next is verification. I think it's really important to, like, as the agent makes progress, you can verify that it's doing what you thought it would do. Last but not least, voice. I always code with my voice. If you guys don't know about Super Whisper, I'll just kind of give you a quick demo. You just click this, and you can yada, 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 and this will just say yada, yada, yada. So I leave like 10-minute long voice notes for my agent. If you know, you know. All right, and what really broke here? The issue was the feature ledger. The feature ledger did not scale. As you started to work on much larger tasks, my feature ledger ended up being like 4,000 lines, 8,000 lines. My agent just could not make sense of it. Maybe today's agents could make sense of it, but at that time, the agent just couldn't make sense of it. So at that moment, I kind of canned the idea. Because talk 2 came, the art of using some AI. This is really where I had my original, so this slide is just a little bit botched by my agent, to be honest. Behind here has the actual workflow. It was the ask, plan, audit, build, verify workflow. So in ask, we would chat abundantly, really think through the problem, brainstorm the solution. After that, we would go into planning, and so we would just have the agent build the plan. This was what we called, this is like the first kind of moment of contracting the work, right? You chat a bunch, and then the agent writes this kind of contract of like, this is what I'm gonna do when you let me go. After that, you have another agent audit said plan, or maybe multiple agents audit them, and they can discuss and kind of collaborate together to make the plan better and more accurate for when the actual build happens. Then you let your agent run, and it'll go for a minute, whoa, 2 minutes, whoa, 3 minutes, oh my gosh, 5 minutes? Are you crazy? That's what it used to be like in winter. I don't know, is it just, that's how it was for me. I was like, oh my gosh, my agent just went for 5 minutes. This is insane. And then the last piece is verify, and this is really, I mean, you're present along the way, but the verification piece is the most important. And yeah, so some of the things that really stuck, I think the linear workflow is helpful. Build contracts, the plan MD, that's going to be here forever. Read-only mode, so basically like when you're in ask mode, you, in Cursor they have like a mode which doesn't let the AI go run off and write a bunch of code when you're still trying to align with it. That was nice. However, I think most of the current agents don't have that anymore, which is a shame. Next, using slash commands to like kind of condense all your prompts, and finally the audits. But what really broke was, so plans were great for the contracts, but they were missing kind of that glue between how did you get to that plan, right? I know what's in the plan, and I have like, let's say your project, like let's say your task is 9 plans, but how did you go through that kind of like idea maze to get to that plan, right? And that's really what we had in the feature ledger, but it was just not really organized enough for the agent to make sense of, and we lost it in the plan MD world. All right, so I had another experience after both of these, and that was my month playing with OpenClaw. Anyone got an OpenClaw? Well, tried it. Does anyone still actually like religiously use OpenClaw? Yeah, that is a no. That sounds like a no. Okay, yeah, so what was interesting for me with OpenClaw was I had something that I called the night shift. So essentially, before I went to sleep, we would talk about all of the tasks that we had been aggregating throughout the day, and I would basically, my agent built its own Jira board, and so I'd put them all in to do, and then I'd be like, hey buddy, I'm gonna go to sleep now, you have all night to do these, make sure they're done in the morning, and he'd be like, sir, I got you, 100%, no questions. I wake up, how did it go? He's like, good plan, you think I didn't do that? I did every single one perfectly.
Yeah.
The next day, or even the same day, what's up? Come this way, you can come this way. Okay, go the other way. My intern at my job is here, and I've never met him in person. I want him to come by and say hi, but I guess they're gonna go that way.
Sorry, Alex. I'm in charge of your, I'm your handler.
Okay. All right. So yeah, essentially the agent would finish all of its tasks, but it didn't actually finish it. It just moved all of them to complete it. I think it probably did some partial work. And then I had like a belief that XYZ was finished. I go to build on top of that the next day, and it wasn't done, right? And this kind of led me to a question. Okay, so I have a status tracker. Things are in to-do, things are in progress, things are done, but how do I make sure they're done? And this leads me to an interesting idea. What if there was just a simple field on each one that said verification proof or something, and the agent just basically had to like sign it and say like, I verified this way, And I was like, that really intrigued me, and I was like, okay, I need to start working on this. And then I had another idea, and I was like, when I'm working with my agent, we're working through this problem, we notice another problem that's unrelated, but still I would like to fix. I'll, put that in my notes and be like, okay, well, there's a bug over here that I need to come back to. When my agent is working on his own, does he do that? Like, what's it doing? Is it solving the issue? Is it just pretending like it never saw the issue? I know it's aware of it. What's happening there? And so I started to beg this question, like, what if I essentially took my ticket system and put special fields there, right? Put a field for found work. Put a field for it essentially proving that it verified things. And that's really what kind of kicked off this whole entire journey into the workspace. We won't be doing any questions for now, maybe at the end. So yeah. So really what the agent workspace answers, or at least mine does, it tries to answer a few questions. So number one is, does my agent know what it needs to know? How can my agent make the run that it's doing, the autonomous run, trustworthy? How can my agent keep its working materials organized? How can my agent learn from the work it does? And how can my agent work faster and deeper? And today, we're going to explore all of those topics. So we're going to start with memory. So this is how we typically track work. This is a Kanban. You can think of a Jira. If you're familiar, so on the left is to do. You have a ticket, and then as a kind of move that from to do into doing, and then once it's done, you move it to done. Right? This is very standardized stuff. My workspace looks very similar. So I mentioned this idea of the roadmap folder. That's really what's in my roadmap folder. There is an inbox folder, an in progress folder, a review folder, and a completed folder. Nothing that crazy. Now, inside of all of those are like this kind of idea of tickets, and we'll talk about that in a second. All right, this is another botch slide, so bear with me. Tickets start small, right? So you can think of, like, if you take a look here, on this left side, you can see that's my roadmap, that's my inbox, and it has a new ticket.md. It's just a simple MD file, very similar to things we talked about in the past. And it'll just say, like, kind of a description, a goal. This is kind of me saying, like, oh, I just noticed this, just make a new ticket, place it in inbox, I'll deal with it later. And then there's a really interesting concept here called journal entries. You know, as we start to work through the problem, we make kind of like structured additions to the ticket to kind of like track our progress as we work through things. And so I think what's really, something really important to notice is that I don't want my agent to just write what it thinks, if that makes sense. I want it to decompose the decisions that I'm making outside of the decisions that what it's inferring, right? So we give it a space for the agent to infer. That might be valuable. Mm-hmm. And then it has any of my decisions separated, right? So they're decomposed at log time. And the idea is mostly every chat, there's probably an insight, probably a decision, probably a new challenge. You know, we're just constantly logging as we work. And so eventually, you know, we keep adding these journal entries to the ticket.md. Well, guess what? Now we have the feature ledger problem. So what do? We graduate our simple markdown file here into a folder. So really there's a ticket.md here, and then you have, you know, some other folders that we'll talk about in a second. So ticket.md ends up becoming, in the beginning it's just like the list, like kind of like it's kind of like a feature ledger, but then eventually when the ticket graduates into a folder, it becomes the table of contents, right? And so basically every single time that we either generate a file or we input a file, or, you know, it's mostly generation of files, ticket.md is basically noting that, saying like, this is, okay, like this is created at this time, it's created for this purpose, this is why. And it's basically like, it's the first thing that an agent will look at when it's trying to find something. So let's say that I guess we'll talk about that later. So I have another belief, and this is kind of just about problem solving, right? We're just talking about the essence of problem solving. A main quest is solved with a series of side quests, right? So it's like, when I want to accomplish something, I don't just go straight. Sometimes I have to, like, let's say I'm building this talk, right? And like, okay, I'll just do slide 1, slide 2, slide, no, that's not how it goes. You know, first you think about the outline, then you like, oh wait, I'm really, section 3, there's something that I need to work on. You go in a rabbit hole, right? It's a side quest. You know, and then you get that all right, and then you think about, wait, section 5, there's a rabbit hole over there, let me go solve that. And then you come back, and then you start going back more linearly. There's all these side quests along the way that end up really actually making the main quest. And so this is an interesting concept. Like, think about making a sandwich, right? You got your bread, you got all your stuff, and you realize, oh, I need to go get the mayo, right? So then you like leave your little workstation, you go to the fridge, you open the fridge, you get your mayo, you bring it over, oh, I need a fork or a knife, you get your knife, you open the jar, you take that out, right? That's kind of all a side quest, right? And so you kind of have like your main storyline of making the sandwich, and you have your kind of consolidated side quest to get the mayo and spread that. And then you just kind of continue on back to your sandwich, right? And problem solving has rabbit holes, Lord knows. And the diaries hold these rabbit holes. So I haven't really introduced this idea of diaries. It's very intriguing. I don't know if there's another slide. Okay, so flash a little bit. Essentially, this idea of diaries is it's instead of it being linear, it's a tree structure, because that's how side quests are, right? You're working on something linear and you branch off, right? And then maybe you finish this little side tangent, you come back and you continue working linear and you branch off again, right? And so instead of it just being a long feature ledger that's just straight, or like a Jira comment, they're all just kind of linear, mine respects the fact that it's a series of side quests. You want to go over here, then you come back over here, then you branch off this way, then you come back over here and branch off this way, and like kind of the underlying data structure all allows for that. And the ticket.md kind of holds like a table of contents, so it's very easy for the agent to navigate, or easier than it would be without that. This is not final, that's for sure. Okay, next folder is called artifacts. Artifacts are essentially where I can dump in context from the outside world. So for example, let's say that I have an important, let's say that I had like an image that was really relevant. You know, I could just dump it in the chat and say agent/artifact, and it will essentially save it, you know, inside the input side of the artifacts. Then whenever the agent wants to generate me some sort of, let's say, I guess whatever this is right here, like a little report, it can just put it in the output side or the generation side. And so it's kind of like just generic file storage for any sort of, I guess you could say like asset, if you will. But I think it's really important to separate the inputs, like what was given, from the outputs, right? What was generated. Oh, and then finally, right, just coming back to this whole found work problem, what does my agent do when it finds work? Well, we have a special folder for that called found work. So in found work is the folder, and then it has 4 subfolders. The first is inbox, so it's like, I'm not really sure. Okay, actually I'll explain this way. There's circlebacks and spin-offs. So circleback means in this ticket, when I get around to it, I'll come back to it. A spin-off is essentially, I'm not going to come back to this ticket. I think that this is going to end up being its own ticket, and I'll just kind of add it to the backlog. And then the inbox is like when I'm not exactly sure about that, and the completed is like basically when I complete a circle back in the ticket, and I don't want to think about it anymore. So this is really how we solve that issue of when you're doing work, you find work. All right, and then the last core piece of just like this memory layer is the resolution, right? So how did the ticket end? You know, what actually happened? Like, and this is where the agent can put the verifications. It can, you know, talk about the outcome, what was delivered, like any proof that it had along the way, any follow-up work. You can just kind of like jot all these down. It's almost like, it's like a ticket.md, but for like where we landed, you know, where this ticket ended, right? And then also we would move the ticket from, you know, in progress to completed. And yeah, so it's like now the end of the ticket.md just says like, okay, the work was delivered. Go check resolution folder, and then my agent, you know, whenever it's trying to figure out what happened in this ticket, it can just go read the resolution folder and figure out where everything landed. So it's kind of like, you know, the other crust in a way. And what this really solves for is a few things. So number one, work can be interrupted and resumed. I can be halfway through a project or 10% through a project, and I can get interrupted. You can't do that in a normal, I mean, you can like come back to your old Claude chat, but if it's a month and a half, you're not finding that chat. You all know you're not finding that chat a month later. Or it got lost, right? I think Codex is notorious for losing my chats right now. It's annoying, but it doesn't matter because I have my ticket system. V2 can learn from V1, so I just, you know, today took a prototype that I had done like very early POCs and turned it into like kind of a prototype, and I just had a second ticket, and I was like, just go look at that first ticket, go reground on it, and then what we'll do is we'll just take it to the next level, right? What are all the learnings? And then we were thinking new ideas, and I was like, okay, we'll go back, double check the first ticket, and so the V2 can actually be built on not just the output of the V1, but also the lessons, the decisions, the prototypes, like all of those messy, like real learnings, you know? And yeah, and then future agents can reground. I think that's really the core of it. And then I guess the other thing is they can find patterns in your previous work, right? Like, what are all the times that how many like iterations have I done on this feature? It can just go look back and answer these kind of questions. I think we don't like really add enough credence to how valuable it is to get an answer to a large question, and it's really powerful in practice. Okay, so now we're going to kind of talk about the next question. Like, how do you trust your agent on a long run, right? Your agent is running for 30 minutes, for 5 minutes. It's building your slides while you give the talk. You know, it's all happening. You're not even paying attention. You even have that, you know, let me just take a village. Okay. I mean, I would never do that, but you know, someone might, right? You're driving and it's just running. You're at the gym and it's coding, right? All these things are happening, right? How do you build the trust to let it cook, you know? And today we're going to talk about what I call the autonomous contract or the agent contract, and we'll get into it. The launch contract, really. So the first, you know, building contract was the plan.md. We mentioned this a little bit earlier. So what you do is you brainstorm your approach, and then your agent takes all these raw ideas and turns it into, this is the first line of code I'm going to write, this is the second line of code I'm going to write, this is the third line of code I'm going to write, and eventually you have like 100 lines of code that it's going to write, and you say, yep, this plan looks good, and then it goes and writes all those lines of code. And this is like the most primitive version of a contract, right? This is like, to me, this is like the atomic contract, right? Just a single plan.md. And then so my last talk, right, I really talked about this kind of like original loop, right? The ask, plan, audit, build, verify. Like this loop still stands today. This is still a very, very core loop in all the work that I do. I'll let anyone take a picture if they want to. But what's interesting is we're wrapping it now. I don't know if I have that slide was a mistake. Let me think about where I saved that. Yeah, I can pull it up. This is how my mind works, so please bear with me. Okay, so we have our ticket.md over there. This is our ticket. Then, as we think through the problem, we go through all of these exploration diaries. And then as we get to like, okay, we pretty much know what we want to do, I build a WWK or a what we know. We basically consolidate all of the freshest, you know, most recent ideas into a single diary, the consolidation what we know diary. From here, I then have my agent build a spec. And the spec is much larger than a plan, right? And then so from the spec, we build what I call a plan of plans, right? So basically, instead of just putting all this in one plan and having a single agent do it, we have multiple phases that will eventually become plans. And then essentially the same like flow that we all know and love that we just talked about, right? Plan, audit, we've added a new one, red, which is like red-green testing, right? So build the plan, have other agents audit the plan, basically prove that it doesn't work today. If it's like a bug fix, it'll basically write all the tests, prove that the bug is real. We can discuss what it learned in the first part before it moves on. This is the idea of a discussion gate. I think super important is like know where your discussion gates are in your large workflows, because your agent will pause there and wait for you before it just continues all the way down here and you have to throw away all the work. Then it will build it, prove it went green, discuss again, re-verify that it went green, and then it can log and begin on the next one. And you just kind of keeps looping through these. So instead of it just being one single, you know, ask, plan, audit, build, verify workflow, now we are chaining them all together. And then what we get at the end is, you know, kind of this idea of the intermittent verification, the greens. Those are what we call intermittent verifications, right? So they still matter, right? That proof is real, you know, and I guess we'll talk about verification later. And then you get the final verification, and then you enter what I call ship flow. Ship flow is basically my process of getting work out the door. I have a few steps and a few discussion gates along the way. And yeah, so it's just like whenever I know my work is 99% there, I now have like a very automated process of like, post to GitHub, fight the agent reviewer in the cloud, yada, 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 yada. And then, eventually it even goes to the point of like messaging my team that the review, like, it's ready for review in Slack. Things like also messaging whoever reported me the ticket, right? Like, oh, this salesperson found this bug, right? So I'll just, in the original chat that they were in, my agent is keeping that in artifacts. And so we can like just open up that URL, send that message there as well. Also, in my GitHub PRs, I'm actually now having my agent put the source URL to Slack where the conversation began for the bug. So if anyone's curious, like, why are we fixing this? Like who's, like, why are we adding this feature, right? Like, where did this start? Click that link, you can see the business context right there. So anyways, let's get back to the talk. Right, so the old loop now has a bigger wrapper, right? So it's still same concepts, but you can just kind of wrap it. Now here's where things get really interesting. Okay, the other thing to note is before we move on, so all these different data types have a home, which I think is really interesting. So the diaries, we know that they have a folder, our specs have a folder, our plans have a separate folder, the plan of plans. Go inside the plan folder, and then that becomes a folder, and in that folder is all the baby plans that made the plan of plans. We have a folder for the loops. So these are like kind of generated loops on the way. Artifacts live there, and then of course, our favorite, the resolution. So all the work has a home. Now this is kind of like the next iteration of it. I'm still kind of tweaking with this, but I've been doing it for about a month. I think it's very interesting. Has anyone heard of like a /goal in Claude? Okay, a few people. Has anyone tried a /goal? I haven't. Oh, a few people. Okay. Any luck? Thumbs up if it's one down, one up. Okay, so mixed jury. Maybe you still know how to do it. So I kind of was doing my own thing that's very similar. So now instead of necessarily having my agent, do the plan of plans and everything, I kind of just set up the run for it to do the plan of plans. And I actually set up the run for it to do a lot of different things. So first we kind of talk about what is the goal. Then we talk about what are the constraints, such as like, don't go over here and mess with this stuff because remember, work can be destructive, right? So like this is out of bounds, this is inbounds, this is what I want you to do. These are some tools that I recommend you use. These are some skills that will guide you through that we've handcrafted along the way, right? And we'll talk about skills later. This is what proof means to me, right? These are the stop conditions. That's very similar to the constraints of like, if you get here, just stop. Don't go further. Do not delete my database. Whatever you think you're doing that is helpful, if you're about to do that, just don't do that. Don't RM, RF, our whole GitHub. And then yeah, last thing is this idea of the return shape. I think we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, so essentially what I'll do is, so now I kind of have like a wrapper for my mega plan of plans workflow. And I just kind of do a setup loop. So what I'll do is I'll have my agent, like we'll talk, I'll have it do a mini spec. So then I can kind of easily read. I'll read through the mini spec, make sure that everything, this all happens in the chat. It actually isn't even saved to a file. So I just read it in the chat, mini spec looks good. I have another command called the loose ends check. Basically I have my agent think about it and say like, are there any loose ends here? What have we solidified? What are the open tangents? And it'll just give me like 3 high leverage questions. And then maybe I'll do another loose ends check if I feel like there's still more questions to answer. And then eventually it's like, no, I think I'm all good to go. And I'm like, all right. Then I run /setup and it builds the launch contract. And then once I say go, it will actually take the launch contract, put it in a place, right? Like, so basically copy that, all that text, rewrite that text to a file, build itself what we call a loop, and set itself up a diary. And what's really interesting is this launch contract, the whole idea of it is, as your agent does really long work, not only does the context get all clogged up, but when he does long enough work, the context compacts. What do you do when the context compacts and it's on a 2-hour run and it compacted in 30 minutes? And it's probably going to keep compacting because you're on Codex and only has 256K context. What do you do? Well, my loop basically tells it whenever you compact, go reread the launch contract. After you reread the launch contract, go read the skills that are valuable. After you do that, go reground on the diary to figure out how you got here. So basically, it's a way of like when it's working and read any plans you're in the middle of, whatever it is. And then at the end of it, we've also defined what I call the landing package. So when it comes back from launch, what do I want from it? I think we're going to talk about that in a second, so I won't get into it. And then finally, the verification. Yeah, so the work comes back as a package. I get to see like what changed, why it changed, what went weird, important. Things always go weird. Things we may have learned along the way, right? Like what tool calls broke, like what work remains, proof. And so I try to have it package it in ways that I can easily ingest it, right? So kind of like a high leverage thing that I think about a lot is how can I have my agent work for hours on a task that I can verify and understand in minutes? To me, that is like one of the, like, there's kind of two layers of essence, or like the two essences of like leverage, right? One is how can I set up my agent for work very quickly? And how can I basically accept and verify that work very quickly and understand that work very quickly? Because then you get to a world where we've got hundreds of agents in the cloud running for multiple days, and it only takes you 2 seconds to kick them off, or you don't even kick them off, and it takes you 2 seconds to understand. That's like where we really want to get to, and now you have, kind of like an agent organization. We'll get there later. But yeah, so the work has to come back as a package, and a big thing for me is teachable assets. And that may be because I work at an education company. We'll talk about that in a second. Oh, here we go. This is the second. Okay, so the agent teaches what happened, right? So it builds me a field report. It can basically in the code, right? Like let's say that I didn't write the code myself, and I had a decent understanding of what part it was operating on, but I want to learn more, right? Like what was the state of that code before we got involved? Who were the key players, right? What were the key functions? What were the key variables? How did they work? What was the tension? What was breaking, right? Where are the nasty seams, right? So I basically have my agent build me what I call, it's called a teach me, and it basically is instructed to teach me about whatever this is. In some cases, they are just a long essay, but you might say, an essay, I don't want my agent sending me an essay, that's annoying. This is like this essay is my favorite essay because it saves me like an hour of chat. It just lays everything out and then actually in an instructional design manner. It's kind of funny. When I told it to start using instructional design principles, oh man, it went away on me. It was awesome. The next level of that is like diagrams. I can also have my agent use image generation to build out diagrams for me. I do this very often. It's actually this whole talk is diagrams. The other thing I have it do is my friend Neo in the back built a fun skill called 3 Blue 1 Brown. If anyone knows 3 Blue 1 Brown, he makes like math YouTube videos. And basically it tries to make a 3 Blue 1 Brown video about whatever concept it's trying to teach me. It comes down to like, I am the bottleneck. My understanding, my attention is really the bottleneck. I mean, there are other things that are the bottleneck too, but for me at least, it's not the tokens. It's my understanding. All right, and so finally, verification turns trust into receipts, or turns status into trust, whatever. Basically, so when it does the verification, I have it, maybe record a demo that I can watch, maybe even open up the parts of the app that I want to go click through. I can have it screenshots, GIFs, send them to me while I'm in the car, send them to me while I'm at the gym, and I can just kind of review them. And then I can also come back and verify myself later. So yeah, I just want to make sure it can show me the test it ran, the test that went red, the test that went green, right? So it's all about it proving that the work was good. And now that we have all this stuff, I'm going to talk about the next piece, right? So the agent can produce a ton of work, right? All these different assets, all these different teachable assets. Where do we store them, right? So you're working in your code base. Where do you store all these assets? What about the ticket? Why not put them all in the ticket, right? So basically the ticket, which is a folder, right, is my answer to, in the past I would basically store my plan MDs in the code base, or I'd have my feature ledgers in the code base, or I'd have a little cheat sheet in the code base on how to do something. And I at the beginning I was like, this is gonna be so nice, everyone on my team is gonna love it. And then, there was a point where I realized, I think this might be getting sloppy. I don't know. Does anyone raise your hand if you keep plan MDs in the code base? Okay, so a few. Seems like most people agree that it's sloppy. So yeah, now all my assets go in the folder. So this is really interesting. We take a look at this. This is a feature I ended up building out. So here's my agent clicking around. It's kind of putting some hotspots on, and then it can say done adding, and then it can come down and it can add some information on it. This is actually Pete. Some people may say, oh my gosh, your agent is verifying its work and screen recording and turning that into a GIF that I can watch while I'm at the gym. That's so cool. It's actually not what's happening here. I don't know if anyone noticed, but if you look between the frames, things are a little if you look right here, there's a line, there's a little break in the lines. This should not be here. In our real application, that doesn't exist. This is actually image generation. I mean, this whole talk is image generation, so I guess it's not really that surprising. But what's happening here is my agent has built a UI mockup of a feature that doesn't exist that I want to exist. And then it's stitched all the individual frames together into a GIF, and it placed a little mouse that it's kind of fake controlling, right? And this is what can start to happen if you let your agent have a messy workspace. There's kind of I guess this is the next slide, right? That asset did not come from nowhere, right? There's a bunch of, really bad image generations of the UI mockups that we had to throw away. Actually, this one isn't even in the final version. We ended up throwing this one away. So there's a bunch of intermittent work that goes into this final kind of clean checkpoint, right? So where does that go? Is it valuable? Is it not valuable? Do you just delete it all? These are questions, right? For now, I'm placing it in my ticket, but I might start deleting it just because I went from having 800 gigs free on my MacBook to 500 in the last month.
Yeah.
Where does the mess go? In the folders. Lovely. Okay, so now I want to tell you about some of the different types of things that I can do in my messy workspace. So the first one is what I call POCs. POCs answer risky questions. For example, I was trying to build a postman skill so that I could automate having my agent build its own postman tests, which has been a lifesaver. And I didn't know how the postman API worked. We have context 7. We were basically reading the docs. The docs can lie sometimes. They can be out of date. I was like, well, let's verify it ourselves. We basically set up a family of POCs all about Postman, the API, and basically every single individual little POC1, it has 3 key files, right? So the first file is the hypothesis, right? It's this is what I think will happen. Then it has the source code. This is the test, I'm actually gonna write it. Then it runs the test, and then it gets the result. And so we have a result.md. Now, all of these experimentations, all this experimentation is crystallized. It's there forever. And I never have to run the code again because I have the result, right? And that's all that really matters. And so now if I ever wanna, let's say take my Postman skill to the next level, I don't have to start from scratch, right? I can just go look back and figure out if there's any, if I have questions, my agent can just go and look back at all of these POCs, figure out the gaps that it left, and continue on with those. The next thing that's super cool, oh, and also it does it in loops, right? So it's not a single POC, it's agent, go keep doing POCs until you finish, right? So each of these POCs is super atomic, right? So just a small hypothesis, a small source file, a small result, and then we'll just do the next POC and the next POC and the next. I've had to do hundreds of POCs just to scope something out and figure out where is the risk, how does it work, what's working, etc. So another thing that's really interesting that we do is what I call research. Who likes Andrej Karpathy? Yeah, a lot of hands go up. Andrej Karpathy is a very well-known, computer scientist to say the least. He actually coined the term vibe coding. I think he also coined the term hallucination. So he's very influential in the industry. He recently had a little piece of information on something called LLM wikis. Super cool concept. The way that it works is you basically compound a bunch of raw sources. Then from each of the raw sources, you basically have your agent generate a small summary about it. That's a hallucination. That's a hallucination. And those are kind of hallucinations. But at the top, basically, you have this thing called concept docs. And what the concept docs do is they connect. I think of the raw sources as like a bunch of dots, like a bunch of scattered dots. I think of the summaries as like a bunch of like cleaned up dots. And what the concept docs do is they connect the dots together. And you can think of this as like very similar to like what a deep research would do when it builds like a final report. It's basically just connecting a bunch of disparate research together, right? So, and you can have your agent do this, like in a task, in the middle of a task, you can have a very large research question. You can have your agent just go compile tons of sources together, create summaries out of them, and connect the dots. Or you can connect the dots with them. And it has to live somewhere in the messy workspace. The next one is teaching assets. We talked about this. Videos. I mean, really where I want to get to is where my agent is just generating me like fire-ass TikTok videos. And I can just like, my way I review a PR is I like watch like a 2-minute TikTok video and I'm like, and then I basically Tinder it. I swipe left or right if I want to merge it. Stay tuned. The next one is proof assets. We talked about this. My agent is like recording these videos for me, stitching them together. In some cases, it's taking a bunch of screenshots and like as it works through the app and tests out my thing, and then it will stitch them together into a GIF that I can view on my phone with the Codex mobile app, which has been a lifesaver. And next is like the design assets, coming back to that whole UI animated GIF thing, the GIF mockup. So my agent will build out design assets for me. It has to have a place to do all of this work. It needs a workspace, or it will litter, or it'll just delete it all. It'll litter your computer everywhere randomly, or it will end up in your code base or in your project. You don't want that, right? Now your project is sloppy. And one of those like intermittent assets can end up actually getting shipped out. And the next thing is utilities. My agent sometimes builds out small tools for itself that it finds valuable, depending on what it's doing. It's like, oh, it's messing up. This doesn't work. Just build a tool. Build yourself a tool. If we really like it a lot, we can graduate it into our tools folder that's kind of shared throughout all the tickets and from my agent. But for the most part, most of the tools just actually don't have many. I thought I'd have more tools, but I really don't have a ridiculous amount of tools. But yeah, they just kind of utils live in the ticket. All right, and then last but not least, the ticket.md and the diaries are kind of what stitch all of these, the research. Oh my gosh. The research, the artifacts, the POCs, maybe that's what that one was. The utils, that's the utils. Whatever else. I don't know why my agent didn't use Hi for the image generation. I'll never understand. Did on some of them. This is not supposed to say that. This was to say it starts to feel like magic, right? So when you have your agent generate something like this, you're like, I never in a million years thought this was possible. This is like image generation. I also had my agent draw like a state machine for all the different state to like keep itself organized. And then it was able to like stitch it together into a GIF and send it to me while I was driving. Like, what the heck? How is this possible? And it really does feel like magic. But it took me like 4 hours of conversation to get this. Yeah. But it was very powerful. So the next question becomes, how do I make it repeatable? How do I take the magic and put it in a bottle? Because if I can get this thing that took me 4 hours the first time down to 4 minutes, down to 4 seconds, and I just have to I just do slash mock-up GIF, and it knows what I mean, and then it just spends an hour building that out, screenshotting different parts of the app, piecing together what it thinks the feature will look like, generating the images, putting it together in a GIF, adding the mouse over it, right? It just kind of chains all of that work together, and all I have to do is slash UI mockups. Now we're living the good life. And the way that we do this is really with skills. But I think what's kind of interesting is when we talk about skills, I don't know, let me take up, who builds skills? All right, so we got a lot of people building skills. When you build a skill, do you sit down and do you work with your agent on what that skill will look like? Who does that? Okay, so still a good number of people do that. Who does not do that? And the way that they build their skills, they just kind of set up a place for the agent to kind of just log what it's doing as it does things, and kind of more like a discovery. Who does that? Okay, so some people. That's really what I do. I basically, we'll talk about it in a second, but I don't build skills, I discover them, right? I don't think of it as like, I already know the way that you're gonna do this. Like, I don't know the SOP. Like, figure out the SOP, standard operating procedure, like figure out how to do the thing, you know, yourself, and just keep good notes as you do it. And then when we finish your run, then let's build a skill out of that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that now. Oh, well now it's what is a skill, LOL. Like, to me, what a skill is essentially, I mean, what it actually is a folder, right? And actually, the skill.md actually influenced a lot of how I think about my ticket.md and like my whole ticket folder system. So shout out them. Like, what they've essentially done is they took what used to be what we call a slash command, which is like a one markdown file, and they turned it into like kind of a compressed folder. And that's basically what I've done here with the feature ledger, right? I took the feature ledger, which is a super long markdown file, and I just compressed it into more of a well-structured folder that can almost like expand infinitely. That's really what's going on here with the workspace or the ticket. But so what is a skill? To me, it's like muscle memory, right? It's like just the idea of bottling up that magic. And really, where does like a skill start? Like, when do I start building a skill? I start building a skill when I'm in the middle of doing something and I'm like, yeah, okay, I have some UI mockups. They're just stills. You know what would really be crazy? Like, wouldn't it be magical if? Wouldn't it be amazing if, you know, wouldn't it be amazing if my agent could build a GIF, an animated UI mockup GIF? And that's where it all begins. And then from here, I basically have my agent set up a few things for me. The first thing it sets up is a diary to just kind of keep track of the run, more like operationally. The next thing is an exercise. The exercise is basically the agent. This is where the agent like not necessarily does the work, but where it like logs what it's learning along the way, where it struggled along the way, you know, kind of what it wants to do in the exercise. You get multiple exercises. You have as many exercises you want. And then you have the muscle, which is basically where after an exercise ends, I say go update the muscle. You have, and then eventually you have like the global skills. So the global skills, we all have global skills. I also have kind of like this idea of ticket local skills, which is really what the muscle is. And so they're kind of like also I think of them as skills and training. And so yeah, basically after the exercise ends, I say now go take what you learned and update the muscle. Muscles are also really cool because let's say I have a skill and I thought it would do X, Y, Z and only does X, doesn't do Y, Z very well. I can basically put it back in training. I can kind of like, I can use the muscle as like a diff, right? Like okay, obviously some things aren't working in the global skill. Let's just create this muscle, mention the things that we're having issues with. We'll use an exercise on the next run to log like what we actually do to get the job done, and then we can load that all that information back into the muscle and go update that global skill. I call this skill lab. So basically, whenever I want to do one of these things, I just do /skill lab. This all just happens in the background. Yeah, and the exercises and the muscles kind of grow together in tandem, right? So it's like the idea of as the exercise is progressing, at the end of the exercise, we'll update the muscle. Let's say, I do the same thing again right after, different exercise. It'll do another run, and then it will update the muscle. And then eventually the muscle can become a global skill. So this is the idea of like the skill promotion. I have all these local skills, and then eventually they get ingested and go into my global skills, and I can use them anywhere. But let's see, what's next? Oh yeah, so this is kind of how I think about it, right? After the first run, when I have my first idea, yes, my agent did the thing amazingly, but did it capture the magic amazingly? No. After run one, we have about 50% of the magic in the bottle. Then we do the diff on run one into run two. And then after run two, it has about 75% of the magic in the bottle. Once we get run three, depending on the complexity of the skill, it's really normally around like 90%, and then run four, 95%. And I never have to like really train it again unless I want to make.
And what's really cool, at 95%, you actually have less fluid in there.
My talk is like a quarter done. It's a warranted roast. All right, yeah, and so like for animated GIFs, I really like this idea of like kind of skill chaining, right? So, or training a skill, right? So I had like this UI mockup skill, right? That would kind of use image generation to generate UI mockups, with things we used to have designers do. And then yeah, I was like, oh, well, what if you took those mockups, you just kind of generated them frame by frame, and then took those frames, and then you kind of used FFmpeg to kind of animate them into the thing, and then add the mouse and everything. It ended up being like, we set up the exercise, we set up the muscle, we try it, we fail it. I'm like, that was terrible. Do another exercise and try again. And then it tries again, and it's horrible. And I'm like, do another exercise and try again. And that's how you get 4 hours of work for a simple little UI mockup GIF. But the hope is, and I still haven't really done this yet, I've only done it one time, never did it a second time. But the next run, hopefully it takes 2 hours. And the third run, hopefully it only takes 1 hour. And then the fourth run and so on, maybe it only takes like 5 seconds. And I just do /UI GIF mockups, and it just works. As so many things in my system do now. All right, and the other big thing is the skills can chain together. Yeah, like let's just say that there was, I don't know, I guess an email skill, for example. It can draft, like maybe you have like a skill that like creates a draft. Maybe you have a skill that like writes the email. I mean, I guess I could talk about my ship flow skill. So I had a separate skill that would do my PR descriptions. I had a separate skill that would, I guess, create the PR. I had a separate skill that would kind of message my boss and tell him that my code is ready for review. I had a separate skill that would, yeah, so all these different things, and I just kind of combine them, chain them together into a single shift flow with discussion gates, super important. Yeah, and then so skill lab is, so there's a few commands that are here. Skill lab is really how I set up the scaffolding to capture the magic in the bottle as I'm discovering the magic. We talked about this. Clues is really interesting. So let's say that I have a skill, it's kind of like in a ticket, I haven't promoted to a global skill yet, but I'm working with a separate agent and I want to do the same thing. This always happens to me. I could basically run /clues, and it could basically dig through all the other tickets that we've recently worked on and look at their muscles folder for clues on, how this capability works. And it actually works decently well. The next ones I have is VC. These were all built in like the command era, right? So I think of it as skills are just an upgrade to commands, right? So VC means valuable command. It means I'll just like write something out and then say /VC. What that means essentially is you look at all the skills and pick the skills that you think are applicable to this moment, right? So I'm kind of like, I don't have to like invoke all of them. Like if it's 8 skills or 9 skills I want to use, just say /VC. It can pick the valuable ones and you can choose those. Next one is UC. So let's say I want to do like a very quick update to my skills. Like, oh, this one thing should say this. It doesn't say that. /UC, change it here, right? So like, just like I don't have to like bring it all the way back in training and do a whole other run or whatever. It's just like, oh, I know the targeted change I want to make. /UC. And the last thing is /NC, which is new command. This was the original one. I can actually, this was really cool. I don't really use it as much anymore because most things go through training now because they just tend to be more like longer run skills. But /NC is essentially like, let's say that one of my favorites is what's next, so /what's next. Whenever I solve something with my agent and then I'm ready for kind of move on to the next thing, I'll just say like /what's next. My agent goes like, okay, these are things we just finished. These are the things that we talked about doing that we haven't done yet. This is my recommendation on what we should do next. And I think that's fantastic. The way that I built that one was I literally just typed / like we had already answered a bunch of stuff and I forgot what we were going to do next. I typed /what's next /NC. It didn't have what's next in my skill library whatsoever. And then it was like, oh, you used NC. The thing that I don't know is /what's next. You probably want me to guess what's next. And then it will propose a command or a skill. And then if that looks good, I'll just say like /approve. It'll add the skill to my skill library, and then it will just do the thing. And so there it just told me what was next. All right, the next thing is kind of going back to this idea of when you have really long chaining high power skills, you can invoke them very quickly, maybe in 4 seconds, /UI mockup GIF thing, but they can run for hours. How do you handle that, right? Like, I don't have hours to wait for you to finish this thing, but I want it done. How do you handle that? I actually got this idea from my boss. He's like the goat of all goats. I'm not going to go into describing him or whatever, but he is the man, the myth, the legend. He basically told me, he's like, oh, Alex, you're spending all this time letting your agent kind of like build things sequentially. I have a waves skill. I'm like, what's a waves skill? He's like, well, think about it, right? You have a database migration. You got to do some work over here. These are all like dependencies. They don't need to be done linearly. They can be done in parallel. So I just have like a wave of subagents spawn, and they all, like one thing works over here, one subagent works over here, one subagent works over here, one subagent works here, all at the same time, and they all, because they all have a small piece, they all do better. And then when they finish, I have my orchestrator connect the dots, and then we move on to the next wave of integrations. And then I'll fan out, have a bunch of subagents do like their small pieces, and then I'll integrate those. He's like, oh, I just have a wave skill. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of, and he's had this for like a year. I think he told me about it before. I didn't really respect it. And then it kind of hit me. I'm like, this man, that's how he can do so, like, he can do all these things, and he can also do so much more code than me too. So the real question I asked, like, does all this work need to happen in order? Like, does it need to be step A, step 2, step 3, or is there a way to parallelize? So now we kind of have this idea of parallel work streams where, you know, the front end doesn't necessarily need to wait for the back end to be done to be at least, you know, roughly built, right? You can't necessarily verify it until the back end is done fully, but you can work on the back, like you can kind of build a spec, like kind of have this contract between the front end and the back end, and the front end workers can work on the front end. They can also parallelize deeper, and then the back end workers can work on the back end. You can have some do a prompt tuning, some do a prototype, like they can just do a bunch of different things, and I don't even have like enough imagination to tell you all the different valuable kind of side quests and work that they can do all in parallel. The other thing that's interesting is when you think about all these different, I call those work streams, right? So you kind of have like front end is like a work stream, back end is a work stream, data gathering is a work stream, right? All those work streams have kind of like tasks. What's interesting is a task can have, for example, someone planning the task. A task can have someone doing the task. A task can have multiple people doing the task. A task can have someone auditing the task was done, right? So you kind of get to this idea of parallel subtasks in a task, right? And you kind of start to get this idea of I'm building an agent swarm, an agent hive, an agent team around each of these individual little subtasks. Ones that are planning out what's going to happen in this one, some that are doing the work, some that are auditing the work after it's done, some that may be auditing the plan before it goes, kind of like really deeply parallelized. If anyone's tried Ultra Code, I assume it's doing a very similar thing. This is actually kind of my current skill in training, so that's like what I've been working on this week. So you know, take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt. But you know, I think if I had another day, this talk would have been fully complete. It was like hive moding this talk. It's still kind of neat. Oh, you just finished, right? Okay, so what is a subagent? Basically, a subagent is you have like a main worker, an orchestrator, and then it can spawn off a little worker A and worker B that actually do the work, and it doesn't have to go do it. And there's kind of, to me, there's kind of 3 levels of agent work. Level 1 is your agent is doing the work. Number 2 is your, like, let's say that the task takes an hour, right? The second version is your agent builds 3 20-minute tasks and delegates those 20-minute tasks. And the last level is like these small teams around each task, right? Where your agent is actually delegating. I wish my agent could delegate to subagents that could delegate to other subagents. I think that's what UltraCode does. I don't think Codex allows for that yet. But when it does, boy, you know, beyond that. But you kind of build a small team of subagents. You have like an agent pool, kind of build a small team of subagents around a small task. They each get an even smaller subtask, and they kind of all just swarm things. And that's kind of how it feels. And I can do like half a day's work in like an hour when I'm like, there's no way this is done. And it's actually done. Like, what the heck? All right, and this is kind of hive mode where we have like, these different work streams that like the main, so this is the main orchestrator. This is like team A. There's kind of like a finite pool of workers. So this is team A, this is team B, this is team C. They kind of have like your different work streams here and your kind of backlog. And the agent is just kind of like picking off the next ticket, giving it to team A, assigning each member of that team a small role in that ticket, and they're all just kind of doing it. And it works surprisingly well. I need to crystallize all the skills involved here, but it's like my new way of doing things. I can't go back. And the orchestrator can stay in the mix. So on the one hand, we have background mode, which is basically where I just let it off and let it organize this whole team. But what's cool too is when your agent is working sequentially, you can't chat with it. It's doing a task. You can't interrupt that. But think about it, when it's delegating tasks, it's actually, for the most part, while it's waiting for those responses, it's actually not doing anything. You can actually kind of use what I call foreground mode and fast chat with it as the background agents are working. And this has actually also changed. So I can like start to continue planning what's next while the other agents are kind of still implementing, like the sub agents are still implementing what we've already decided, which is kind of a game changer as well. That one sort of works. But you just keep tuning the skill and maybe one day it'll be perfect. And then there's like kind of like a whole thing about like how do I set up Hive mode, right? Coming back to this idea of setting things up, right? I basically have a new version of my setup skill, which does like the launch contract stuff we talked about earlier. This one is called setup and delegate. It identifies the work streams, sorts things into kind of like near-term tasks, medium-term tasks, long-term tasks. I kind of pick the slice of where I feel like definition of done belongs in that list. Sometimes my agent thinks that the near-term stuff is like, it's actually, that's gonna take forever, and I'm like, no, let's just stop there. Sometimes it thinks that the long-term stuff, like, we just have a different definition of like how long things would take, right? Yeah, and it can find dependencies and build viable task backlogs and delegate the pieces that can run now. Okay, so that's really the end of the ticket system. I feel like there should be a slide here. Yeah, there's a slide missing there. If I refresh. Well, there's a slide missing. It's supposed to like basically bring everything together for the ticket system. So ultimately answer a few questions in particular. One is memory. How does my agent know everything it needs to know? The next one is, actually I'll just find the slide. I'm just going to kind of come back. I think it brings everything together. We've covered so much. This is amazing. How can my agent? So how can my agent know what it needs to know? Well, we have the memory system with the ticket.md, the diaries, the resolution, all those pieces. How can I make the run trustworthy? I give it a contract. I tell it where the boundaries are. I tell it what definition of done is. I tell it what I want back when it finishes, right? That's setup. That's like our plans, everything. How do I keep the working materials organized? Well, we have different folders and artifacts that kind of keep, the intermittent, and I actually need to do this, keep the intermittent work separated from like the finalized work and have a special place for the really good kind of crystallized, like kind of milestone artifacts. And how do we learn from the work it does? We use the skill lab to set up the exercises, and we do the muscles, and then we graduate those into global skills. And last but not least, how do we get my agent to work faster and deeper? Hive mode. All right, we've gone through so much already. I have a little bit more. Maybe show of hands, we can decide, do we want to stop here, or do we want to see the rest? Like, okay, everyone that wants to stop here, no one's probably gonna raise their hand. Everyone that wants to continue, raise your hand. Dang, it's about half. Maybe I can speed run it.
But I guess in Hive mode.
What'd you say?
You can run it in Hive mode.
No, I can't. That's the thing that humans can't do. Okay. So yeah, ultimately, hold up. Oh, this part is so cool. Everything's cool to me though. That's the problem. Okay. Getting into Hive mode. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is how a single call can change a plan, right? So you have your game plan, and then you go to sprint planning, and you're like, this is what I'm going to do this week. And then, your boss is all like, I like that idea, but you should do it this way with these things over here, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Before you know it, it looks nothing like what you and your agent had fully planned, right? So what you got to do is you have to go back to your agent and be like, okay, we changed this, we changed that, and it's like, oh, you changed all those things? No sweat. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. this change means this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, now I see. And then it's like, okay, but this is still workable. I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. That change also means these things. It's like, oh, yeah, we didn't redo this. What if, instead of you having to explain to your agent what changed, it could just see it for its own self with its own eyes, right? What if it could just see the source? What if it could see the Gmail? What if it could see the Slack? What if it could read the meeting transcript, right? All on its own. Then it could just know. And so a better way is essentially we have our plan. I present the plan in my meeting. The meeting is transcribed. We leave the meeting. I tell my agent everything changed. Read the meeting notes. It's like, oh yeah, I see. Okay, I'll update the ticket. And then we just work from there. And that is actually like, this was kind of my big thing, I think a week or two ago, was like kind of adding what I call, maybe I'll name it here. Yep. And not only, this is kind of interesting, right? That one sprint planning call, if I have like 8 things in flight, because I've interrupted so much work, and we talk about all those different tickets, and all of those have new kind of requirements that come, right? That one call can affect all these tickets. So now I can tell my agent, read the call, update all the tickets, right? And it's pretty bananas. So I call this the Intel Corpus. It's very different from, if we look back at, you know what? Let me do all that to you. Check this out. We look back at kind of these original folder structure that we talked about. We have our projects, we have a roadmap. The roadmap is really the ticket system that we all just went through. And then we have the corpus. That's where like it kind of takes all of these like raw meeting notes, raw emails, raw Slack messages, raw Google Docs, and just kind of ingests it all into your workspace. The agent can just kind of work with it malleably. And this is the Intel Corpus. So the ticket system remembers the work, and you can see it's like ticket 1, ticket 2, ticket 3, right? It remembers the work, right? It remembers what was done on your machine, right? And the Intel Corpus answers a different question. The Intel Corpus remembers the company reality outside of your machine, right? The Intel Corpus is how you bring the world into your machine. That's kind of how I think about it. MCPs are very similar, and MCPs are very similar, but they don't actually. I mean, you can store the data that the MCP returns, but yeah, it's a little different. I just also find that when it's in your system, it's just way easier to query against. You can build on top of it, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what goes in the Corpus? Meetings, Gmail, Slack, Docs, customer feedback. I'm gonna go faster. Inside a meeting record, yeah, I'll skip that part. So meeting roll-ups is really cool. So I have my meeting, we kind of store the summary of that. Then you have the day's worth of meetings. If I had 3 meetings that day, we can kind of talk about the themes of that day. Well, you can build up to the week. What are the themes of that week? What are the themes of that month? What are the themes of that year, right? So you can kind of, or quarter and then year, right? So you can kind of just keep, and now your agent like has a good sense of like literally the narrative of that year, which is just insane to me, just by peeking, right? There's a tiny little peek. And you know, there's one canonical source of record in your, so instead of like in your ticket, you can ingest, I was doing this earlier, I was ingesting the meeting notes into ticket 1, and then I found that meeting was also valuable to ticket 2. So I was ingesting that there, and then another one that also I felt was, oh, it also is affected by this meeting note as well. I'll ingest it here as well. I was like, you know what, I should just be, you know, number 1, moving it outside of that, of all the tickets, I should kind of have a different layer for it. And then number 2, let me skip around. Yes, context has to be ingested. I should have a routine, an automation for grabbing all of my meetings, transcribing them, synthesizing them, so that I don't have to like go, like it's not when I want the meeting that I can get it. It's already there. So whenever I want my agent to use the meeting in that moment, I just like, oh, what happened in that meeting with Lauren? She had all these requirements, I forgot. You just double check that, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a list. I'm like, oh, that's blissful. That's amazing. Thank you. And ultimately, what it allows you to do is ask bigger questions. So when you have all of your kind of communications, your team's communications in one place, you can answer significantly larger questions, right? Like for example, I can also not just ingest my meetings, I can ingest my teammates' meetings, right? So my sales guy, I can ingest his meetings. Our customer success people, I can ingest their meetings. Maybe if Luis is nice, he'll let me even ingest his meetings. He won't. Yeah, and so we can ask much bigger questions. Some questions that I've been asking recently is, did I move the needle this week? You know, am I being a good manager to my intern? Things like that. Does Luis hate me? He says he doesn't. And then finally, we can, what's really cool is when we do all this research, kind of do deep research on my own Intel Corpus, we can also we can cache those results as reports or concept docs, right? We've got this idea of connecting all the raw dots together. All right, and then ultimately there you get 3 layers. You have your projects at the bottom. This is like the delivery surfaces, is like really where the work is. You have your roadmap. It just kind of has the work memory of like all those tasks. And then finally you have your corpus. It has the company reality, and it can also be built on top of. Yeah, and then so many sources can become one concept doc. I'm gonna skip all this part. This is super cool, but it ultimately ends up looking like this. We have a bunch of corpus files. They're like kind of attached to many different tickets. The tickets are attached to many different corpus files. The roadmap tickets actually, obviously affect all your projects downstream. It's pretty cool. I just want to take a quick moment to beg the question, if this is Gen 3, right? If Gen 1 was the feature ledgers, if Gen 2 was the plan modes, if Gen 3 is the workspace, what does Gen 4 look like?
World context.
World context?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that means. And we will not be taking questions. So yeah, what does Gen 4 look like? What should we expect over the next 6 months? When I come back in December and give the next version, what should we expect? It's going to be bananas. So the first thing is I want to get off my machine, right? My machine has currently 500 gigabytes of storage. Last month it had 800. I think next month it'll have about 200. And so I'm kind of screwed. If you do simple math, I'm kind of screwed. So I need to get into the cloud, right? And now what this means, I can have potentially, a pool of like 10 different agents and 10 different workspaces that all share the same ticket system and share the same Intel Corpus, and yeah, it's fully distributed, and they can all run in their own kind of timelines. This is essential. My agents can, not just give me like little essays, but they can give me my 3-minute TikToks, right? They can give me 5 3-minute TikToks to help me understand what the heck Steven built. And I can be like, oh yeah, no, we're not pushing that. Redo that. I'm just kidding. It's probably great. Steven is my intern in the back. Shout out Steven. I guess that was all I had. There's supposed to be more. I guess my agent didn't get that far. Well, yeah, so if agents are going to do real work, I believe that the workspace is an essential, and I think it will come out of the box. And hopefully today I've convinced you that the agents will come with workspaces out of the box in the near future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to get out of here, feel free to. I'm not going to keep you hostage. Of course, you've been able to leave the whole time, so the fact that so many of you stayed, to how much you care about this community. Questions, anyone? I can start with Will.
Roadmap. That feels sort of company global, right? Like it's
Yeah.
useful for not just the agent, but for everybody.
Yeah.
How do you share that today? Or
Dang.
maybe that's Gen 4.
Yeah, it is Gen 4. Essentially, once you get to the cloud, then you can have a company global Intel Corpus. You can have a company global roadmap or ticket system. And I think that's going to be really cool, where now our engineer in Spain doesn't have to like call me and ask me about a feature. He can not just see what I delivered, but he can also see how I delivered it, right? The decisions I made along the way, the things I intentionally. Actually, it's better if I could see his decisions, because he's better than me.
So are you still interacting with a company roadmap like in Jira or in GitHub?
We don't
issues or something?
we don't really have that. We just kind of scope things out as we go. I mean, we're just a small startup. But yeah, I could see. I mean, my fundamental belief is that Jira doesn't like allow for the Jira could work. I just only get like
Just
allows
use that
it
as an
to have
example,
workspace.
like just-
Yeah, I don't know how this would work with an actual ticket tracker. That's a great question. You got a question?
Have you made any changes in your actual code base or the way you structure code to make it easier for agents to work and also easier for you to understand?
Great
new
question.
changes?
Changes in the code base? No. Changes in our PRs? Yes. We are no longer dropping monster PRs at all. We're no longer dropping medium PRs. Pretty much, I mean, maybe some medium PRs, but for the most part, our PRs are now like very atomic, right? It's not even like before it used to be atomic like commits, now it's like atomic PRs, right? Where it's like, let's say that we want to do this feature, and then along the way on that journey, I figure out that, okay, well this, it's built on this other feature, which wasn't fully implemented last time, right? Instead of me fully implementing that and then doing my feature on top of it, we'll split that into 2 PRs, where the first one will finish out that feature, and then the second PR will do the additions to it. All right, so we're stacking a lot of PRs. What's really cool about this concept is what you can do is you can actually write the whole PR and then have your agent split them after. Instead of like knowing that you want to do the split beforehand, you can have it just do the whole thing, and then you can beg the question of like, where are the unclean seams? Where are is there a clear like this work chunk and that work chunk? Like, should we split the PRs, and the agent can just do that? It can stack the PRs, and then it just constantly rebases them and babysits.
So, how much time do you guys, or do you think you guys spend reviewing PRs now versus like
way more time than a month ago? Way more time than a month ago. Just because I think what's interesting is we just get to the PRs so much faster. So it's like the ratio has gone up significantly. It used to just be like so much time cooking, and then like also another interesting thing is so much is happening without us present that we have to spend a lot more time. So the ratio of time spent reviewing PRs, and my boss is getting mad at me. He's like, dude, we have so many drafts. What's up with all these drafts? And it's like, well, my actual work now is really just reviewing this thing. So all these draft PRs are like, that's my queue. Yeah.
So,
Let's see if we can get another question.
We did about 260 PRs in 2025, and in the first quarter of 2026 we did 200.
Yeah, so what he's saying is all of last year we did 225, and then the first quarter of this year we did 200 PRs. It's not necessarily an indicator of, an increased velocity, but at the feature level it's definitely, shown. Question in the back?
So, this is not so much like a technical question, but I own a healthcare business, and I'm in the process of starting to build out agents, to accompany my human workers. In your opinion, and the rest of you guys in the room, feel free to chime in. Should I pursue that? Should I continue to build out agents, or just kind of wait until other people build agents for my niche?
That
On
is
the fence.
actually such a good question. I think there's kind of 3 different ways. To me, I see 3 different options, actually. So today, you are building a local agent, and you're having to add a ton of scaffolding, like all of the tiny ticket system. There's a new product coming out called Managed Agents. They're from OpenAI right now. I think maybe private beta.
You said managed?
Managed agents. So they kind of operate in the cloud, and they're managed by either Anthropic or OpenAI. And they kind of already integrate this idea of they have their own little ticket system. They kind of have their own skill lab. They kind of have a lot of these things built out. So you kind of could do what I'm doing and just you want to be like a month or 2 months ahead, or you could wait for the cloud option, or you could buy someone that's building, healthcare specific, like let's say that you're a vet, right? The agents for small vet SMBs, right? So you can either go with the one that's super verticalized. You can be a little bit less verticalized and go with the main provider, but that's already doing the cloud and already doing all the goodies. Or you can kind of start to work like me, try to be a little ahead. I'm also an AI engineer, right? So it's kind of my job to hack this stuff together on my own, just to know how it works, right? So we can talk afterwards about your specific opportunity, or your specific challenge and your problem that you're trying to solve. But ultimately, I would say today, be careful with it. I'd say either just wait for the managed agents, which I think you probably even can access today. They're just a little bit more expensive, or you can try to find a provider. The only thing I would say is typically the providers are behind the state of the art, which is the Anthropics and the OpenAIs. So that's the thing to keep in mind is the frontier just keeps moving. Anthropic just keeps adding so many features that if you have a provider, it's going to be very hard for them just to keep the floor, just to keep the table stake stuff.
Yeah, Yeah, and that's why I thought, okay, well, maybe we pursue our, we have a cloud Teams account, maybe we just pursue building our own.
Yeah, but building your own is another. It's also very difficult, and like as you saw, like and my stuff is like kind of like spit and glued, to be honest with you. Like a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of ingenuity, a lot of spit, duct tape, glue, and sleepless nights. And yeah, I mean, the day that I can just get out of a box, I'll be happy to just take it out of a box. We'll see. I'm not exactly sure if like I put so much investment in. I don't know if it was worth it. Maybe in 2 months, I'm not using any of this. We'll see. Over here.
First, I really admire all the work you put into this.
Appreciate it.
I really feel like you're on the edge of trying to figure out how to hack these together. But I wanted to pick your brain. Do you have any like online resources or personalities or engineers that you follow?
Have you
feel
heard
like
of?
have like a good North Star?
Oh yeah. I already know the answer. Have you heard of? Well, number one, Kaparthi. Go. If you know, you know. The next one is definitely, there's a guy, small guy, not too popular. His name is Nate B. Jones. Nate B. Jones on YouTube. I try to put a lot of you on him. He is just, I like YouTube videos. It's like my go-to. But no, he's just great. He just released one about like Opus 4.8 and just basically talking about how like it's clearly not as good as GPT 5.5 and a bunch of other things. And it's like the sentiments that I share that I think I'm kind of alone in sharing and are kind of like controversial opinions, with some of my friends, he just always seems to like resonate them. We're very similarly, like we have a lot of mind share, I guess you could say. And we just kind of come to our own conclusions. Sometimes a little off, sometimes I'm a little off, but overall, like that is he's just like some guy in Seattle, gray beard, old, sits in his room. All he does is just Substack and make his videos. He makes them like every day. It's ridiculous. He's the GOAT. Question in the back? Oh, yep.
Hey, just curious. So, have you or anybody in the room have kind of rent online AI servers on DigitalOcean to run and train models?
Has anyone trained models with DigitalOcean?
Yes, because they have you can rent the AI's cloud GPU so that you can run to it. I just heard the win of it.
Yeah, I've never done it.
Never
I mean, let's
tried.
take a show of hands. Who has like fine-tuned a model or tried to do any training with cloud GPU? Okay, so one
Is there
guy.
any,
So
like,
new best friends.
Yeah. What kind of tips and tricks you can share?
I mean, what about?
There's a good what is it, Stanford course where like that's part of the course.
Okay.
But so like they go through all the optimizations and stuff like that.
Okay.
There's a ton of content in it. It's kind of all for naught because unless you can rent tens of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, you rather than but if you want to put it on your resume and try to go find a job, that would be nice.
All right, question in the back.
So, but essentially what most agents are just an LLM chained to a specific role. But when you talk about, for example, having this larger system that ingests all of your workflow and documents, and then possibly all of the workflow and documents of your entire team, at what point does it start to border like the digital twins that can kind of replace you? We already have like Zuckerberg.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Here's CEO me, book an appointment with like my digital twin. It'll make decisions.
Yeah, I've lost this slide. That was one of my Gen 4 slides. So this is actually how my agent decided this. I basically, for every slide, I had to build 3 different versions, and I got to pick the one I liked the best. So I had to disqualify some. Oh yeah, so this is kind of like the clone me skill. I've had my agent try to build a clone me skill so it could make, basically I had to go through all of my chats and figure out like what's Alex's secret steering sauce? How does Alex make decisions? And now we have a skill called Alex Decision Lens. And it's basically my attempt to distill myself, right? To clone myself into a skill so I don't have to do my job anymore. And I can move up to the next layer of abstraction and be a boss. You know what I mean? I don't want to be a...
You're like giving an AI your brain.
What?
Does that not freak you out a bit? But essentially saying, like, learn how to be.
Oh, it freaks the... Yeah, 100%. Like, it's the most insane thing in the entire world. Yep.
What are you doing for your birthday, Alex?
This is my... I mean, we had some great meetings. Some that excited me. We had some other great meetings. I had 3 great meetings today. and then this, and like my agent kind of built the slides out. That was super cool. Didn't fully. I mean, wish I had one more day to iterate, but YOLO. Will, what's up?
Are you gonna be sharing any of this? Like, I assume that, like, this is all based on skills that you built and system prompts and things like that that drive these agents. Like, is there an artifact that is this talk, like that? I can
Yeah,
boot
I
up
have
and
100
start
and-
using the roadmap, using.
Yeah, I have 140 plus skills that I've homegrown. Once you start, I probably update 5 skills a day. Probably make 1 to 2 skills a day. What's interesting is like most of my updates are what I call a small to a medium update, but I'd say once to twice, in some cases 3 times a week, I have what I call 10x unlock. A good example of 10x unlock is the Intel Corpus. That's probably the best example. Oh yeah, today obviously doing my hive mode stuff. That's another 10x unlock. And so every once in a while, and this is why it's the most amazing time in the world to be a builder. Like we just are so. I don't know what the next year looks like. I don't know what the year after that looks like. I mean, there's definitely some risks with all this stuff. But today, here, right now, this month, the first half of 2026, nothing too bad has happened in my opinion. And fuck, it's been fun.
Language.
Sorry. I get excited.
No guard.
Mom is here.
She hears me at home. Yeah, we're here.
I'm not familiar. Did you build this out, this viewer, like top to slide thing, or is this a part of one of the? Yeah.
What, like this website
Yeah,
here?
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, there's another piece of my system I call visualizations. Basically, what my agent does, like a lot of autonomous work. I don't really want to like look through the file tree and like piece together like what are the important assets, what's just like the slop, what's like the kind of the intermittent assets. So I have my agent present me what it did at the end. I have a few others. Just take me a second to pull it up. I'm trying to decide if it's worth it. No, it's not. We're all tired. Yeah, there's so much cool stuff I have on my computer.
Local, so again, it's something that you built yourself to then.
I didn't build it.
No?
My agent built it.
Okay.
All on the right here. My agent also built this one last night because I told it to. Just
Yeah,
like
I'm talking about this whole thing right here. It has the breakdown, it has the Jason on the right side. It's just,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, my agent just built it. Like I was like, oh well, I now like okay, I'm gonna be sleeping while you generate all the slides. Well, can you also generate 3 options so I can pick what I like when I wake up in the morning? And can you also house that for me so we can just do this effectively?
Nice.
Yeah. So just like when you really start to, and that's kind of the power of this system of like when you start to like really chain enough scaffolding together, right? It can go a bunch of time without through compactions, right? You can go through many compactions and remember its launch contact, remember what it set out to do, and it can deliver. You know what I mean? It's just, and I did it all with hive mode and normally would have taken me half a day to do something like this. With hive mode, it was able to just launch out sub agents that like this one's gonna wait for this image generation, this one's gonna wait for this image generation, this one's gonna check. You know, obviously, could have been a little faster and a little better, but yeah, roughly there. Or one more?
Do you think it's possible to over-engineer your agent
100%.
workspace?
100,000%, and that's why I didn't really want to like. That's why I'm like a little hesitant to share the skills because it's, yeah. No, I can definitely do that, and that's why I'm saying like I'm also excited for the world when we get a workspace out of the box, so I don't have to do all this shit. You have one?
Yeah.
Oh, it's yours. We'll come back to you, Paul. What'd you say?
When do you sleep?
Well, the agent's running.
Yeah,
Night shift. No, I definitely sleep less than I should.
I mean, because I was gonna ask that goes with the follow-up question. The actual question being, can you envision yourself stepping away as a bottleneck? Like, meaning, if as individuals, if we're the bottleneck, having to do reviews, like, let's say you want to step away, go, I don't know, touch grass.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I actually had a very interesting experience. I think it was yesterday. I was praying for this talk and I was freaking out the whole day. The day before that, I had a great day. I actually had my agents running. I left my laptop at home. and I had a bunch of agents running, and I got a haircut. This was a Tuesday, and my agents were working, and they're doing great work. And then I was like, oh, I can just use Codex, and I can keep prompting them. And then I got a coffee and kept prompting them. And then I went to the gym, and I kept prompting them. I did about like 3/4 of a workout, and it took me about twice as long, but the whole time I was building, right? And I think, you know, I spent enough time on my freaking machine that I felt like I was like, I deserve this. I now have enough scaffolding to get my agents to run long, and I also have enough things built out to where they can send me mobile verifications. They can prove to me that they finished work by sending, like, by running the application themselves, by screen recording that, by screenshotting that, by converting that into a GIF, by adding the little mouse over it, and then sending me that, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, this built that feature. Okay, well now I just have to go review the freaking PR and productionize it. But yeah, no. So I think that we're about to get unhobbled from our computers, right? If you've been spending like 14 hours a day minimum at your computer, like me, you know, doing your day job and then doing your day job at night, but in the fun mode, which is how it's felt. I think we're gonna get untethered very soon, and you know, especially once we have everything in the cloud, the idea of like being at your computer is kind of mute. Paul, you have one more?
Yes. Why does it take so much time? Is all this just metered, or you know, is it just GPUs? Why does it take what, a day to come up with these slides, and you need one more day in order for it to finish? I just don't we have enough compute power out there to make this happen?
The problem is not that. I had it up. Oh yeah. This is the problem. This part. This is what gets me. Right here. Exploring abundantly. You know what I mean? Going through all the diaries, thinking about all the different options. You know, what's so interesting, when me and Luis were talking about this, I think on Friday, is like, you know, in Luis's words, he's like, when you used to ship a V1, it wasn't a V1, dog. That was like a V.2.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
and now
you learn what you learn, and what you don't know, and finally you get to WWK.
Finally get to WWK.
But you have no idea how long it's going to really take you to get there.
You don't know how exactly, right? It's like you think that it's like, and you try to come up with a recipe of how to move through the problem. But this is like an age-old question of like, how do I know what I need to know to build what I need to build,
Yes,
right? And it's just like, it can just, I don't know. I think that there's like a lot that we can do on that.
But once you get to that, it should be the latter part should be a lot faster.
It is when when I've aligned hard enough, right? Like if I to me this talk is like 85% there because no, the slides are right, the content is right. The actual generation of the slides kind of a miss.
Well, I've used a prompt, and I'm going to mess it up here a little bit. I go, ask me questions until you're 100% positive that you're going to generate what I need out of here. And it's going to ask me a whole bunch of different questions, question what I've done and everything else. And by the time it's gone through, I have it recheck, and then my output is at 99% at that point.
Yeah, I have an interview me skill too, right? So you just have to keep applying like new ideas of like what's next. That can help shave a few seconds off of asking what's next. Interview me, loose ends check, like all these. There's like just all these different like little devices, and it just comes through. Teach me like how can I compress understanding what the agent's trying to explain to me, because I don't know everything in the freaking world.
Yeah, I get that.
So it's all about like just the compression of the communication, right? At the end of the day, we're still talking out of our mouths, and it's still talking back to us, right? And it's just at this point, like the bottleneck is communication and my understanding and my attention, and that's kind of what it is. But yeah, increasingly the bottleneck is not, can the agent check its work? Can it do a good job? Can it understand me? I think we're gonna end it here for now. I think this is an amazing time. The time is also, about 9, which is when we said it would end. So thank you so much everyone for coming out. And get home safe and have a great night.